add value to your business, or do you want to just be this administrative person?
And often if you look at your talent team and the caliber of talent in your company, they correlate.
You could hire the best person for the job if they were in your candidate pool.
All these individual employees, one by one, together, their voices all come together to articulate the culture of the company.
Welcome back to Hiring on All Cylinders. This is your host, Sean Simmerly. Today, two new guests who you have not heard before, at least on the podcast. We're lucky enough to have our amazing head of product, our VP of product, actually, Gaurav Kataria, to the show. Gaurav, welcome.
Thanks, Sean. Really happy to be here.
Yeah, me too. I'm stoked for today's conversation. And part of the reason for that is the guest in the other chair. So you may have actually heard his voice in a couple other pieces. He's an expert when it comes to recruiting. He recruits over at Weebly. Actually, he's a recruiting manager over at Weebly. I apologize.
Correct.
Raul Lopez with Weebly is joining us. Raul, thanks so much. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for inviting me.
Of course. So today we have a bunch of different things that we're going to want to dive into. And I think with the guest that we have on today, we'll get some good content here. So I want to start with a very high level question. And that is, Raul, tell me what you think about the resume.
Well, the resume is like almost any human being you'd meet at a dinner party. You get something that looks like something, and then as you dig a little bit more, it either goes deeper in what you originally thought, or it turns out to be something completely different. And it's that process that can consume a lot of a recruiter's time.
God, dinner parties already. No, I totally agree. I mean, I feel like the actual meat and potatoes is sometimes obfuscated. That was a horrible pun given the existing structure of a dinner party here. But sometimes that's obfuscated by an inability to actually craft what is the actual representation of the individual.
Yeah, because they think they're a certain thing, they represent it another way, and then you're dealing with a client, if you work at a recruiting agency, or with a hiring manager, which hopefully is a great partner in both situations, for what they're looking for. And at every one of those steps, you can just get this huge separation. And so you start out with the resume, and at least you have to do two things, at least in recruiting, which is a kickoff meeting. Just at the end of the day, the high level there is make sure everybody's on the same page on why you're hiring, right? But then eventually that has to be turned into something that helps you source, that helps you calibrate. And then that's where you get into situations where you just try to find people. There's all these different ways of doing it. Yeah. And you look at all these profiles, and there's such a variance. People use all these different words to describe different things.
Yeah.
And then when you look at their work experience, you basically have to open up like 8 tabs to sort of get to the truth of what it's taking you years to build, right? Which is sort of like, okay, the tenure, the types of companies, the industries, where they are in their career, and then you get to the last thing, which is like, are they going to be expensive? Are they going to fit in my budget? And so these are all things that just like, you can do the bulk of that other stuff manually, but like knowing their salary, that's just an unknown. Yeah. You almost have to vet people, and you get a sense of things where you go, I probably want to make sure I know what their salary is. But if you could get all that information up front, you're able to sort of true all the versions of information that you're seeing, and it's that last human piece where you're able to sort of really get a sense of like, I think I know what I've got here. I think I know why I want to reach out to them. But you know what? I think I know roughly what kind of salary they're making or looking for. That's the bulk of it. I always tell people recruiting isn't tricky. It's hard work, and it's chasing down all these things.
Yeah. Oh man. Okay. There's so much to unpack there.
Yeah, I think this is such an insightful point that Raul made. I've spent a lot of time talking to a lot of recruiters that we work with. And the reason they got into recruiting is because it's a human business. You connect with people, you talk to them, as you mentioned, at the dinner party, and then you try to learn about them. You try to learn about their interests, their background. And that is where the kind of the energy of recruiting goes in, to make that human connection and to close those candidates. But oftentimes, you would see a recruiter just having 8 to 10 tabs open, or sometimes even 50 or 100 tabs open, researching, looking at a candidate and seeing things on their resume and it's like almost going to the library where you're pulling out the encyclopedia and then you're pulling information about, well, they have this company on this resume and I've not heard this company name before, so maybe I should spend a little bit of time researching what this company is and what they do. Or you see a school and you're like, is that even a real school? I've never even heard of it. Yeah, I mean, you would say that, okay, let me do a little bit of research on that. I mean, just from our own data, we know that there are at least 2 million unique job titles in the world. So when you see these job titles, you're like, I don't know what does that even mean?
Yeah.
Like you will see a job title SDE2 and you're like, what's that?
Yep.
And even if you know, like you're a pro in that field, you know what SDE means, you don't know whether SDE2 is senior to SDE1 or is SDE1 senior to SDE2. So you're just doing research. You're basically doing research and you're not doing what you wanted to do as a recruiter, to make that human connection, to attract the candidates to come work for your company. And what we believe is the whole resume building process has gone to an extreme where resumes get stuffed with keywords. Recruiters end up writing complex keyword queries to search through resumes. And it's just a time-consuming process where you're not doing what you intended to do, and you end up just becoming a Boolean expert.
Man, I totally agree. And I think that we have a lovely product launch that we'll want to talk about a little bit later that will probably connect all of these strings together. But I want to kind of pump the brakes a little bit. You were talking about actually recruiting from an agency perspective or a corporate perspective. I'm curious, do you have experience recruiting in both agency and corporate?
Yeah, I have agency and in-house recruiting experience.
Perfect. And so, like, I mean, something that I'm kind of curious about is, does a resume serve a different purpose for those two different functions? And I guess if so, how? And if not, I guess what do you always look for when you're looking at a resume?
Well, I think in general, you're going to have to run through the same sort of due diligence, right? I think when you're in-house, it's different, right? This is your job, your teammates, that's its own dynamic, right? Sure. At an agency, honestly, it's you will take your game to the next level because it's like there's a bunch of people doing what you're doing, working with different clients. So this whole thing we're talking about, where heuristically you're sort of able to more quickly assess candidates accurately. Yeah. Now you've got like 25 people around you doing this, right? So some of the good stuff is this sort of amorphous cloud floating over the group, a little bit of best practices, a little bit of knowledge base, like the 2 million titles. Well, there's 2 million titles, but here's the 40 that apply to what you're looking for, right? But then people leave, and so, the cloud loses a little bit of its knowledge base. And so I think in general, when you look at a resume, I think the task on hand is the same. It's to true it, right? And it's a slightly different at an agency than in-house. I think when you true it in-house, you're going to focus as much on culture as anything else. Yeah. Although all the pieces are important. I think when you work at an agency, you're really, you need to deliver value based on that relationship. Yeah. And so you really have to sort of push up as far as the value of the candidate, and then work as best as possible with the client on culture. But that's more of a joint process. Whereas when you're in house, you own that. You're the first greeter and the first line of defense for your company's culture. Would be the way to describe that.
Yeah, absolutely. So talking about kind of truing up the resume against kind of, I guess, other sources, it's not just about that specific what's written on that piece of paper. What ways are there for people to kind of decide whether or not this resume is accurate, like outside of bringing that person into an in-house interview?
That's more than a podcast worth of questions and answers. I think there's just a couple of different things that you try to look for. I'm just going to go back to old school recruiting stuff, right? I like it when people tell me months and years on the resume. When I see just years, it rarely works out that, on some fiscal, it's like it's a calendar year that you're going to be rolling in and out of jobs, right? Yeah. And so to me, I always like it when people are as detailed as possible. So that's another thing, is I try to create a couple of ways of looking at their resumes that speak to how detailed they are, right? And then you just sort of play it backwards and play it forwards, and then you are always going to have some concerns, if only because you don't know that person. And so one of the first things you try to do is a quick pass on the resume when you talk to somebody, right? So right there, I'm not able to true it without talking to somebody, right? So that's a built-in expense, if you don't have a 360 view of a candidate. And that's, one of the tried and true ways to see if somebody is solid. I mean, this is as much as making sure that you're setting them up for success, but it also speaks to, at a minor level, integrity, right? You want people to be accurate, and, you want to work with people that are like that, right? And so, part of the process is now you have a part of your phone call, instead of focused on quality, like which is everybody's concern, but for an agency, you really, really need to deliver on that. Or instead of focusing on culture, right? Although there's overlap between truing someone's resume and culture, you're just simply spending time, double checking information on the resume, to make sure that that we're all on the same page. Yeah. And so it's important. It has to be done. When you don't do it and you take a shortcut, there's always surprises. You learn that at an agency. Any shortcut you take is a surprise. And so the more information you can get when it comes to truing somebody's resume, the better it is, right? So there are, for example, if somebody has a certain title and they're very junior in their career, there's a disconnect. Right. So somebody says they're a director, but they're like 2 years out of college. Yeah. I'm all like, well, I'm going to go work for you. This is all true. Or we need to figure out what director means at your company. Yeah. Right. Like I have a friend who's a managing director at First Republic, and, everybody's a VP. Right. So then you have to unpack, what does VP mean at a bank? Right. At a telco. Yeah. At an internet company, like Minister of Culture. What are we saying here? Right. The titles. And there's nothing bad in this, and people need to realize themselves, and cultures sort of develop these titles to sort of differentiate themselves and create sort of a family, right? But hey, I've got to figure out what I'm getting in this resume, notwithstanding all that. And so there's a process where you look at tenure, seniority, the types of companies they work on, then if you go below the fold and you look at the activity, I call it their like activity pie chart, like, which is all the things they say they do. If they're a product manager, now I want to figure out, like, are they talking about facilitating a strategic meeting to discuss key points with stakeholders, or here's the 3 releases that I released. Yeah. I'm like, all right, well, okay, these are 2 different people. I want to talk to the second guy or person, right? And so, so anything you can do, there's some stuff you can't bake out of it. You got to talk to people. Some people, my wife included, are terrible resume writers. And I want to put under the bus. Yeah. I want to put that she can walk on the moon, and unless she can get like a notary public to certify that she can do something, she won't put it on her resume. Right. So that's another interesting dynamic, right? Like a guy like me, glass half full, they're like, can you do this? Like, well, you know what? Or I'll die trying, right? Yeah. And then there's other people that, will put the most minimal thing that they've done because they want to make sure that it's factual, that, so it's funny, you're almost rewarding people that exaggerate, and then people that are high integrity get lost in the process. So it's great if you can true that as well.
I think, Raul, you make a very interesting point. I mean, you're trying to get to the integrity of the person from the resume, because as you said, it's like a window into the person and you're looking through that resume. The other side of that is there are candidates that are way too humble, and they don't embellish their resume that much. They're humble. They don't. They only talk about a few things, not a lot of things. I mean, our own research has shown that there's a little bit of gender difference here. Women tend to put fewer skills on their resume that they have equal experience as men, and they are in a similar role, and yet they put fewer skills on their resume. So men, if you just look at a keyword search, you'll end up finding more men in your search criteria. And that's not fair. I mean, as a society, we are promoting just searching for keywords, and you are removing resumes from the stack which have fewer keywords. And it just so happens that those resumes could be gender-based or could be minority-based. So you're absolutely right. I mean, what we want to achieve is really look through that window, understand the person, But if resume is not that perfect window, how can we improve that window so that you have a better understanding of the person behind it?
You know, you bring up an interesting point. We had some unconscious bias training, and it turns out that that dynamic was totally predictable. Guys will apply for jobs men will apply for jobs if they have 60% of the skills. Women will apply for a job if they have 100% of the skills. You know, and so there's a lot of things you can do so that what you're seeing on the job description addresses that and sort of neutralizes that effect. But there's also more information, once again, right? So if you look at somebody's career arc, right, they could say like, you know, I just come into work and try my best, and you know, if there's any way I can help, let me know. And you're like, all right, well, there's not a lot of information there. Yeah. But then you see that they've worked at these great companies and their career arc looks amazing, right? And then throw in, you know, a dash of some academic success, especially at a school you may not have heard of. And you're like, immediately say like, I want to talk to that person. Like there's no way that they could have been swimming in all these waters of greatness if they didn't bring something to the table, even if they're not doing a great job. So truing it really comes down to, you know, what we try to do on the kickoff meeting, right? So what does this all come down to? What's your criteria, and are you consistently enforcing it? And on the resume side, you get a lot of noise, and so you have to spend time making it map to the criteria in a real way. And then on the hiring side, you want to make sure that, you know, that just people are reminded about the criteria. You know, going back to the unconscious bias training, just being reminded what the criteria is solves the problem like 80% of the time, right? And so if you can solve the problem on bias on information, right, because it is information and keywords, and, you know, somebody, usually a guy, a man 2 years out of college saying he's ready to be a VP of growth, and you're like, all right, well, I love the chutzpah, but I'm not sure about that. And then somebody else who's just worked like consistent, like great job tenure, you know, at great companies, you know, and you just find out about the company, and then you just know that they've released these great products and that they were in product management, right? So you, like, I'll give you a classic example. People won't know this, but GE, you know, has a wide range, right? But unless you know this, you won't know that anybody working on the Predix platform is anybody associated with that's an amazing product, right? And so these are the things that you try to unearth, you know. So that, for example, is soft memory, right? Anything we can do to put into knowledge base is great, but there's only so much you can do. But you can cover the bulk of this in truing the information so that you're able to consistently apply a criteria, which is reinforced on the interview and hiring process, right? So it's really nice to be able to match those things together and get them to line up.
Absolutely. I think that the idea of kind of getting more information, right, expanding that knowledge base is so crucial. And I mean, I know I'm incredibly excited, and I'm not going to plug this, but I'm just going to say we are releasing a new product soon that does a lot of this. And Gaurav, I'd love to just ask, like, what are you most excited about this release? For anyone that doesn't know, it's called Entelo Insights. I promise this part will be brief, but I want to know, what are you most excited about it?
Yeah, Sean, I mean, our inspiration for creating Entelo Insights was the recruiters want more information, but we can't just throw more data at the people, right? I mean, we live in an age where you're looking through hundreds or thousands of resumes. If you just throw more data at you and you end up spending 2 minutes, 3 minutes per candidate per resume, then it's just going to be a time sink. You're not going to be able to get to the right candidate and spend time making that human connection. Yeah. You'll be just reviewing data. Our goal is to make it so simple and so intuitive that if we can save you 30 seconds per resume, and you have to go through thousands of these resumes, we would have saved you months in a year, so that you can really focus on trying to understand the person behind the resume versus playing the keyword game. So our goal with Entelo Insights is to go beyond the keywords, is to go beyond the obvious elements of resume, to really try to understand the career arc of the candidates and present that career arc in a visually intuitive manner so that a recruiting professional, a talent professional, can absorb that information quickly and have everything that they need at their fingertips to understand a candidate and to then reach out to that candidate with just the perfect amount of information.
Yeah, go for it.
And there's one facet that you brought up. So again, I'm in the trenches recruiter, right? Yep. There's also a cadence to when you're getting information. So if you're laboriously opening up 8 tabs, it just like it's hard to keep your focus. With the right amount of information, which I see with Insights, right? You're quickly able in the it's sort of natural amount of time it takes to make at least either pre-qualified or qualified call, depending on your approach on how you source, right? To quickly know, and then you almost get an acceleration if the amount of information is in the exact right quantity and the different pieces that you need to make a decision fairly quickly, but not while taking any shortcuts. But by being able to allow somebody to do it at what I would call a natural speed, it allows them to sort of get to like a cruising altitude, like just in the zone. I don't know what metaphor works here, but if it takes you like 7 minutes to get on the other side of whether or not you should talk to a candidate, by the time you're done with that, like we call it the sourcing coma. Like when there's this thing called a sourcing coma. I don't know if you guys know this, but this activity I'm talking about that you do manually, you do it for like 2-3 hours and you're in a coma.
Zombie.
You can just tell. Like somebody, you at the agency, you'd see somebody walking around and like, as a zombie, you'd be like, "Were you sourcing?" They'd be like, "Yeah, I was sourcing." So it's nice to be able to like comfortably and in a way where you sort of it invigorates you, quickly see people and go like, "Okay, I'm making some good traction here." It's not like this grind my teeth, go ferret all these rabbit holes to like, okay, I think I can put this guy on a list. It's like, no, I saw this person and I was able to quickly see their career, the companies they work at. Everything was meaningful, on top of how they describe themselves, which is important, but also all the other facets that they may be embellishing or may be not mentioning to you. And so then as a professional, you come in and make that decision. And it's great to be put in sort of like a cockpit to be able to do that. And it's like, it's doing your job the right way, right?
Gaurav, you built a cockpit. That is probably the best description I think I've heard. I love that. I'm gonna steal that. The recruiter's cockpit.
Absolutely. And I mean, a lot of times when software is built for enterprise segment, it tends to become too boring, too mundane, and it just looks like a cockpit with too many dials and too many kind of gauges and too much information. Our inspiration with creating Entelo Insights was to create a much more pleasing cockpit experience, where you have the information presented to you and you're not getting lost in reading the meters and reading the gauges, but the information is presented to you in almost like a consumer app. Like you're looking at it on your mobile device and you have a very good, clear understanding of what's special about a person, versus you're getting lost in the details and you're back to the coma. So we really want to avoid that situation of throwing too much data. We want to present the right amount of information in the most intuitive manner so that it's a delightful experience and not an excruciating experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
I agree.
Yeah. All right, I don't want to keep us too long. I wish I could keep talking all day with you two because this has been fun. Raul, are you going to be joining us for Recruiting Automation Summit in June?
I think so.
Ooh, okay. For Recruiting Automation Summit, I know I'm incredibly excited for it. We're going to have a phenomenal list of speakers. Raul, I think we actually should probably talk to you about, maybe chatting with some folks there for us. But if you want more information on that, we have a full website on that as well. Entelo.com/RAS, R-A-S, will get you all of the relevant information. Yeah, Raul.
I have one takeaway comment.
Please.
I think the greatest compliment I get, I just had my 360 review, but the common theme there was that people said, and it was really nice to hear this, which is that I love recruiting. I think the best thing I can say about Entelo Insights, it's that somebody who loved recruiting took the time to put this together. And that's the most powerful thing, because I'm able to do my job really well and enjoy it while I'm doing it, in a way that's, I don't want to say easy, but it's intuitive, right? And all the other things that we've talked about in this podcast, but basically just the right way and the right amount of time and with the right workflow. It's really nice.
That's better than I could ever put it.
Thank you, Raul. Thank you for that feedback. I mean, we really put our heart and soul into building this product. And we spent time with yourself, with many other colleagues that you have in your organization and in other companies to get the feedback. And we really listened. We really listened to that feedback to create an experience that's truly delightful, because our job here is to make your job more delightful and more exciting. And we are here as Entelo to keep on creating this and keep this tradition of innovation in the recruiting space alive, so that what you are seeing today, you get to see many of these things in every quarter from now on.
Well, I think what's just as exciting is it sounds like you guys are going to evolve this even more so that's exciting to hear as well.
Yeah, this is not the end, that's for sure. Well, Raul, this has been such a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us. Gaurav, same to you. And until the next time, folks, please check in. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast, and hopefully we'll see you at Recruiting Automation Summit June 13th and 14th in San Francisco. Talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.